Greetings and welcome to the 56th episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases. As always, I'm your host, Dark Elf Guy, and today we finally have the long-delayed thief and stealth-themed episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases with 13 mods ideal for those, who prefer to stick to the dark shadows and sneaking around rather than walking around in the daylight. And real quick, I did just want to announce that we are recording the audio for this video using a different program than normal, so it may sound a bit strange. That's because my other audio recording program isn't working for some reason. It's one of a number of things that aren't working currently. I have a lot of computer issues going on at the moment, and I don't really know why, but oh well, it's minor details. Anyway, let's go ahead and get things started with our popular mod of the week, which this week is Living Cities of Vvardenfell by Helios and Wrye. And this is a pretty big and rather impressive mod that sets out to give the NPCs of Morrowind actual daily schedules and activities. No longer will you find NPCs in the exact same places all day long. Now they'll run errands, stop by the tavern, head home at late hours, and wander the streets during the daytime. This is naturally a somewhat complicated mod, and it's certainly not without bugs, since Morrowind was never really designed to have scheduled NPCs, but it's one of the best mods out there for what it does, and it certainly makes the game more immersive, and if you're a thief, filled with new opportunities just waiting to be exploited. But first, let's go over some of the actual features here. So Living Cities of Vvardenfell is structured around adding NPC schedules to individual towns and cities, and it does actually, cover most of the towns and cities in the game, such as Cedar Lane, Balmora, Eld-Velothi, Morgan, and so on and so forth. There are a few halls here and there, most notably Caldera, which hasn't been scheduled yet as far as I know, but all in all, this mod covers most of the vanilla game. Now, NPCs now follow, fairly unique routines. You often find regular folks out walking around during the daylight hours, but they might head to the pub or tavern during the evening, or go shopping at various traders during the day, or just go straight home and lock the doors. If you're using the scheduled locks mod that comes with this plugin, this means that NPC residences and shops will be locked up when they're, not at home, or when they're sleeping for the night. Usually, if they're not found at night, it's because they're at a tavern like the Eight Plates, which, as you can see here, has a lot more customers coming in at night time than in vanilla Morrowind, with lots of NPCs getting drunk and enjoying themselves. And this also means that shops will, lock up for the night, so if you're trying to, shop at an odd hour, you may be out of luck, since most shops close by early evening now, but again, this presents a unique opportunity for thieves. Since now you can learn the schedules of various NPCs, figure out when they're not at home, or staffing their shops, break in and steal everything they own, all without getting caught. Truly, this is a perfect mod for those thief-like characters that are often frustrated at the constant, never-ending surveillance of the shop owner who, never moves. Because now, they finally do move. They've got lives, things to do, people to see. They can't watch their stuff 24/7. Which means now you can profit handsomely at their expense. For our house mod of the week this week, we have Suran Underwater Manor by WulfShaman, and this mod adds a scenic underground manor somewhere beneath the streets and sewers of Suran, including some truly lovely underground gardens with lots of waterfalls that, really add to an interesting but, cozy atmosphere. And this home is primarily meant as a thief's getaway, with a lot of bits that are, underwater and hard to get to. Not to mention a dozen or so hidden and locked away little areas where you might find a bit of loot or an entire section of this underground manor. And of course, just like any house mod, you'll find a bedroom down here, which includes a very cozy and atmospheric design with lots of clutter, a desk, bed, and some labelled storage containers on the shelves here. Though it is a bit cramped to get back here though. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, to be honest. And there's also a decent sized and open lounge area out here in the back, which is probably my favourite spot in the entire home, with these, lovely custom couches to take in the view, and tons of waterfalls above with gardens to make for a truly quite scenic place to relax. There's even some shelves and chests to use for storage and display purposes here. And you also find a small kitchen and pantry hidden away in the back here, which again is rather cozy and ideal for cooking a small meal just for yourself in your new lair. Now, we won't be showing off the entire manor here, since a lot of it is hidden and really you should find it for yourself, but I will just, quickly point out that this home does come equipped with armor display mannequins, And if you're a thief looking to live in the gym in the Ascadian Isles, this is a perfect home for you, and definitely worth checking out. This week's gameplay mod of the week is Loot Sack by Fliggerty and Wildman. And this mod adds a loot sack that you can purchase from a trader in Vivek for a mere 150 gold. And essentially what this loot sack is, well, a loot sack. It's a container that you can carry where you can stash your loot. Like, say you're a thief and you're stealing everything that isn't nailed down, but oh no, you're carrying too much. You don't want to, drop all this stuff and risk getting caught by the guards. So what do? Well, you put down your handy-dandy loot sack and throw your hard-earned, albeit stolen goods into the sack. And this loot sack can carry quite a lot, allowing you to take a lot of stuff with you on the fly. The only real downside is that in order to actually carry it with all the stuff it contains, you need to equip it as a weapon, and if you unequip it, it drops back down to the ground. This, of course, makes for a rather suspicious scene, as you visibly carry a bag of stolen loot around, like one of those stereotype thieves you see in the cartoons or something. Don't mind me, officer, I'm just hauling some perfectly legitimate goods around in my little bag here, nothing to see here. This can be a little inconvenient though, since you have to carry the sack like a weapon, and it has horrible weapon stats. That means you're going to have to, put it down every time you get into a fight or combat encounter. But either way, this is a great and immersive little gameplay feature for thieves, or, anyone really, and definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have our Dungeon Mod of the Week, and this week we have Dungeon and Diamond by Archimaestro and Teres. And this is a pretty cool little dungeon mod that starts out when you find a trapdoor behind the Thieves Guild hideout in Wolverine Hall. And this is a dungeon designed specifically for thief-like characters, and you don't see too many of those, I gotta say. And this dungeon uses a unique architecture set, as you can see here. That's, fairly dark, perfect for, sneaking around without drawing too much attention. Now, the first part of the dungeon is mostly filled with small rats, which are, largely harmless. They'll just, scurry away from you like, rats do. But of course, the further into the dungeon you go, the more dangerous it's going to get, with more traps that you're going to, discover or accidentally set off. Like pits in the floor, where slime monsters will try and, well, I guess, eat you, I imagine. And in fact, the traps are kind of the main appeal of this mod, because there's so many different kinds of traps that, you can accidentally activate if you're not being too careful. Like, the floor suddenly disappearing out from under you to reveal a pool of, well, hot lava that's just waiting to burn your skin off, or axes swinging down from the ceiling, or a bunch of crossbows firing bolts into your back. There's just an insane amount of creativity in the dungeon trap design here, and Archimaestro has done an amazing job of creating a wholly unique dungeon unlike, anything else that you can find on Vvardenfell. And, I really can't think of any other mods that do anything quite similar to this, to be honest. There's also just a lot of fun and cool little details here, like animated skeletons that'll, get up when you get near them, and a lot of other surprises that are ideal for thieves in particular, but, could potentially be a lot of fun for any type of character. And this is definitely a mod that's worth checking out, and it's a really fun dungeon, and I do highly recommend it. For our items of the week this week, we have Assassin's Armory by Helios, aka Michael Bennett. And this mod adds a ton of new weapons to the game, some of which are assassin, thief, and, stealth themed. While, others are perfect for warriors, archers, or a variety of other potential character classes. And you can find most of these new weapons scattered about, really just about everywhere using leveled lists. They really blend in pretty well with the vanilla game, so you might find a few for sale from weapons vendors or at, trade houses or so on and so forth. You can also find these new weapons and items in smugglers' caves or other dungeons mixed in with the loot you find in crates, barrels, and other containers. And for the most part, they won't start showing up in common leveled lists until you've reached about level 10 or so, I don't think. Especially the more expensive and nicer weapons. But anyway, let's take a quick look at some of these new weapons here, and you can see my character holding a couple here. Most of the new one-handed weapons added to the game also have a defensive dual-wield partner that acts as a shield, which is of course, rather cool looking. To show off a few more weapons at once though, I'll be using different weapons in each hand, so we can, showcase more of these weapons at once. And real quick, here you can see one of the new two-handed claymore weapons that you can find, an ornate gold claymore I believe it's called. And here's another set of dual-wielded weapons, including a glass short blade, paired with what I believe might be a Buster Sword, or at least something that this mod calls a Buster Sword anyway. I always thought that, Buster Swords were a bit larger myself. And anyway, here's two more of the more interesting weapons included here. This mod adds a couple of rapier long blades to the game, as well as something called a wrist blade, which has a different style of handle where you grip the top and use the blade in a sort of stabbing motion. Probably a good weapon for thieves or assassins. There's also a ton of other more random and curious looking weapons included in this mod. I believe there's about 40 or 50 new weapons in total, including bows, long blades, short blades, axes, some rather curious spear and blunt type weapons, and much more. And this mod does come with an optional plugin file that adds in dual rifles to the game. But again, this is a add-on plugin, so if you think that might, break your immersion or just kind of look silly, you don't have to use them. And anyway, here you can see a bunch of these weapons gathered together on the tables in Rano Manor here. And they're, fairly nice looking and decent weapons. So obviously, they do look a bit dated by today's standards. This mod was released in about 2005, I think. And at the time, they blended in, pretty well with Morrowind's vanilla weapons in terms of texture and multiple quality. But since then, there's been a lot of graphical upgrades made to Morrowind's default weapons. So the quality difference is fairly noticeable now, especially if you're using a lot of graphics mods. But regardless, these are some cool and fun weapons that might be, worth checking out for yourself. This week's quest mod of the week is Join the Kimono Tong, a Kimono Tong faction mod by DD4N. Now, this mod isn't exactly a thief mod per se, but it is, stealth related. And it basically starts after you complete a vanilla Morrowind quest, that involves the delivery of a Khajiit to Balmora. And assuming you're a Dunmer, since the Kimono Tong is a nativist organisation, you'll be given the option to join the Kimono Tong when you return to the small shack village of Hala Ode. And as Morrowind's native crime syndicate, you'll get to do a lot of dirty jobs for the Kimono Tong, that run the gambit from, bribing Halali officials to stealing various items, murdering witnesses, eliminating rival smuggling organisations, and, working in the skooma and moonsugar trade. The Kimono Tong employs a similar skill set as that of the Thieves Guild, with snake, light armour and short blade being their preferred skills. And there's a ton of quests here, and they're mostly built the same way as the other faction quests, so they're fairly simple and easy for the most part. Go here, do this, steal that, kill this person, etc, etc, etc. But this means it blends in pretty well with vanilla Morrowind, and there's, I believe, over 30 quests included here. So it'll definitely keep you, occupied for a little while, and allow you to participate in the Kimono Tong side of their conflict with the Thieves Guild. If you're looking for a stealth-based criminal organisation to join, this is definitely a nice one to check out. Next up, we have our Landmass Mod of the week, which this week is Beyond Ysgramor by Miles Aquarius. And this is really more of a quest mod than it is a landmass mod, technically speaking, but it does have a lot of landmass elements, hence why we're including it here. And first things first, so this mod starts out when you come across this mysterious island a long ways from Vvardenfell with a small estate on it. And at first glance, this estate appears to be abandoned with, strangely empty gardens and two locked buildings that require some, further investigation. And this mod does rely a lot on security and lockpicking skills, hence why it's, sort of thief-themed. And once you break into the estate here, you'll find a set of well-decorated rooms, but somewhere in this manor, you'll find secret passage to the city of Windhelm, home to the Windhelm Oddfellows, apparently, a new guild and faction with interests on Vvardenfell, similar to that of the Twin Lamps. That said though, before you can get to Windhelm, you'll first pop up in a dungeon of Ysgramor, which is really more of a manor that you can claim, assuming you can defeat a few guardians that are employed to prevent, trespassers from just roaming around the halls here. It should be mentioned that this mod is geared for characters over level 30, and in fact, you have to be at least level 30 to even stop most of the quests here. And anyway, eventually you'll come to the hidden cliffside city of Windhelm, which doesn't exactly look like a, sort of Skyrim version of Windhelm, does it? I mean, I suspect this city isn't really built to lore standards. You'll notice a lot of indoor architecture here, and most of the residents are Argonians and Khajiits, not Nords as you'd expect from a Nordic city. Of course, this mod did come out over a half-decade before the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, so some differences are to be expected, but anyway, it's certainly an interesting city in the cliffs here, and you'll notice it does have a slight conflict with the On the Rocks replacer that's included with the Morrowind graphics and sounds overhaul, but it isn't too bad. And anyway, while there's a main quest and faction associated with this mod, there's also a ton of side quests for you to do around town. Really, there's quite a lot of content here, and it seems like almost every other NPC has at least something for you to do, including some rather unusual and unique characters. For example, there's even an Ogrim resident, which is a bit odd in itself. He has a quest for you to do involving a thieving scamp. I guess some data really don't get along well with each other. And anyway, there's also a lot of unique and atmospheric interiors for all the new buildings and homes here, which is something I always appreciate. As far as I can tell, there's no copy and pasted interiors anywhere in this mod. At least not in the, first few locations that you get to visit. There might be some copy and pasted interiors later on, though. And anyway, moving on to the heart of this mod's content, you have a new faction, the Windhelm Oddfellows, which is an organisation a lot like the Twin Lamps back in Morrowind. They're interested in freeing slaves and, whatnot, but they're far more aggressive than the Twin Lamps are, and in a way, they're sort of the opposite of the other faction mod we just looked at, the Commander Tong, because they're a stealth-based organisation that relies on speechcraft and security to help, slaves and free them, while the Commander Tong is a stealth-based organisation based on slavery and drug trafficking. So, you kind of get your pick of good and evil thief-like organisations to join. In any event, you do need to be at least level 30 in order to start these quests, and while it starts out kind of small, running errands and delivering small items, this is still a pretty epic questline overall, as we'll get to later on. Eventually, you'll get to, fight through dungeons, explore massive ruins, and visit new cities and lands to explore and fight through on various quests and missions for the Windhelm Oddfellows. There's a ton of content here, probably at least a dozen hours of playtime, and possibly even more if you really want to do everything, including lots of well-written dialogue, journals, quests, exciting dungeons, and much more. It does conflict with Tower Rebuilt, however, so that's something to keep in mind. I don't know if a TR compatibility patch was ever made. Someone should probably harass Abbott about that. But anyway, in any event, this is a fun and very cool Landmass Mod that's well suited for people with thief-like skills, and I'd really highly recommend checking it out. For our NPC Mod of the Week this week, we have Ness, the Thief Companion by Matthew the Bagel. And as the name of this mod would imply, this adds an NPC to the tavern in Ebonheart, who appears to be trying to break into a chest when you first meet him. And this is basically a thief companion that you can convince to join you on your journeys across Vvardenfell. Of course, when you first encounter him, he'll tell you a bit, or rather a lot, about his life story and why he's a thief and all that. Which, seems a bit odd for a thief to, just spill their entire life story right away. You'd think they'd be more careful, honestly, but, minor detail, I suppose. And anyway, after all that, he'll become your companion, and they have a lot of the typical companion features that you might expect, such as weapons and combat options. You can also ask him about his health and whether or not he needs a potion, some basic spells that include water walking and levitating, which, is kinda handy since he can keep up with you even if you take to the skies, and a few other basic following options. Of course, he does also have a companionship as well, and anyway, he is quite handy to have around in a battle. Like, say, for example, you get into a fight with a bunch of guards or something like that, he can provide some, pretty good, backup, including ranged weapon support with a crossbow and lots of bolts. And he's also pretty good with a short blade for when it's time to get up close and personal, with close quarter combat. And if you're a thief, or just a regular character looking for some more companions, you might want to give Ness a try. This week's new meshes and textures of the week is Ascadian Isles related by the Stat D Lion Court. And this is quite obviously a texture replacer for the ground textures in the Ascadian Isles region. So things like grass, dirt roads, stone roads, mud, sand, and everything else related to the Ascadian Isles. Having said that though, this is, a themed episode of Modern Modding Showcases. So you might be wondering how exactly this is supposed to be related to thieves or, stealth-related stuff, and, truth be told, I had a really hard time trying to figure out a mod that might fit in this category that, stuck with our theme here. So I thought, well, there's a Thieves Guild quest in the Ascadian Isles region, isn't there? I mean, you gotta free that one guy from the Fliggerty jail, for example. So, well then, that makes it fair game, and I stick by that assessment. And, anyway, all kidding aside, this is a rather colourful set of textures for the Ascadian Isles region with some rather, light-coloured stone brick for the main road that goes up to Fliggerty, a sort of interesting yellowish green for the grasslands, and a bit of a hint of orange in the dirt roads here. It does kind of work well together, and there's some really high quality landscape textures here. Most notably the sand textures look pretty good here, and there's also some interesting grey mud textures for the lake bottoms and whatnot. Now keep in mind this mod was released in 2010 I think, so it might be a bit dated when compared to newer mods like Lush Cascadian Isles by Flash 3113. But even so, it provides a different colour scheme that might, appeal to some. And the Sat has always done a lot of good work with his mods, and this one is certainly, worth checking out if, you want a different colour scheme in the Cascadian Isles region. Next up, we have our modest resource mod of the week, which this week is Lore-Friendly Libations by Roguette. And this modest resource basically adds a ton of new wines, beers, and booze in general to the editor for you to use in your own mods. With, mostly lore-friendly labels involving ingredients and regions that you can find in the game world or the large Elder Scrolls universe. You'll find a ton of brews marked with Cyrodiil, Vvardenfell, Elsewhere, Hammerfell, and so on and so forth. This basically gives you a lot more variety for decorating interiors, since, as I'm sure a lot of you know by now, one of the key elements of interior decorating is bottle and booze placement. If you've ever played one of my mods, for example, you'll always find dozens of bottles and local drinks in practically every interior I design, simply because they're great for filling up empty spaces. But there's not that much variety in the base game, and this resource largely solves that problem, giving you over 80 new bottles of booze to place in your interiors, allowing you to provide a much more diverse set of details in each room. Some of which might make more sense for Imperial interiors, instead of having, lots of local brews in a wealthy Imperial's house, for example. And you might be wondering how this is all thief-themed. Well, as I'm sure most of you know, most of the Thieves Guild hideouts in the game are in bars and taverns. So, by that extension, thieves drink a lot, and so thieves like booze. So, adding a resource that adds more booze to the game, that seems pretty thief-related to me. I think this is a pretty sound, logical argument, I would dare say. And anyway, in addition, these bottles are already set up for you with alchemical effects, names, and everything else. You just have to, load up your mod with this resource and pretty much just drag and drop what you want into your own interiors, which is, extremely convenient. And if you're looking for more, lore-friendly clutter to use in your interiors, this is definitely a good resource to check out, and I'd highly recommend it. Now for our underrated mod of the week this week, we have Wayside Inn by Naming Way, and this one adds a small but rather unique looking and scenic little tavern along the crossroads between Plegiad and Balmora. Sort of where you find that one noble lady with a quest to track down a particular bandit. And anyway, this is a really cool looking tavern, I gotta say. You'll notice the author actually used hundreds of planks to craft a unique, one-of-a-kind tavern that just works really well with the landscape here. That's one of the fun things that you can do in the editor is, if you can't find something that fits with what you want, you can always build a custom building out of existing assets. But anyway, moving on inside, you'll find a pretty normal looking Imperial Common interior with a first floor that's basically an open tavern with patrons drinking here and there, and upstairs you'll find a common sleeping area that has a balcony overlooking the tavern floor, which again is a pretty cool design. And the tavern is pretty normal otherwise, with a barkeep that can, rent you a bed or sell you some food and drinks if you so desire, and of course if you have the coin on you. And having said that though, there are a few unique little additions here, such as patrons that are actually sitting at the tables and counters, and there's also a small quest you can go on if you happen to be a member of the Thieves Guild. Apparently this fellow here needs someone to, break into the Census and Excise office and retrieve some stolen goods. It's not a big quest or anything, but it's a nice little addition. Now, some of the other patrons do also have a small bit of unique dialogue, but all in all, this is just a fun little atmosphere addition to the road to Balmora. This week's Blast from the Past of the week is The Abandoned Shack by Mode Locrian, and I do apologise if I mispronounced that name. And as the name of this mod would imply, this adds a small abandoned shack in the middle of the Bitter Coast region, which looks, pretty normal on the exterior at least, but there's a few secrets lurking inside, as we'll get to in a moment. And inside is a fairly, bare bones shack with a lot of blue lighting, including a small hammock, some crates, a table, and, not a whole lot else, honestly. However, having said that, if you keep an eye out, you'll notice a note that'll start you off on a small series of quests that involves tracking down a few different characters. Now, as it turns out, the shack is owned by a specialty smuggler who gathers and finds unique items for collectors, and there's quite a bit of dialogue involved with this quest that, fleshes out the story nicely. And this is no simple house mod, there's quite a bit of hidden secrets waiting to be discovered here, and eventually you'll find a hidden tunnel located underneath the floorboards of this small shack, and down below you'll find a rather sizable cavern complex that apparently this smuggler has tapped into over the years in search of a sunken Dwemer ruin that allegedly contains powered Dwemer steam armor, a special type of armor that gives you a boost in combat, and this is a rather colourful and atmospheric set of caverns that includes a nice bit of blue lighting and a few waterfalls here and there. And in a way, this is kind of a house mod, but it's certainly also a quest and dungeon mod, since there's a small dungeon that you'll eventually discover. But in the meantime, you'll find this really cool looking bedroom located down here in the caverns, including a journal left behind by our missing smuggler friend. And there's some really interesting and unique designs in here, including a set of platforms that leads up to a table and chair overlooking the bedroom cavern here, and there's also a small display and storage hall off to the side with bookshelves, tables and chests to store your stuff in. And again, the design here is quite interesting. This is a pretty good, hideout for a thief or other, stealth-based character, nicely isolated and hidden. And having said that though, there's a few hidden secrets in here, but, we won't be showing those off due to, spoilers naturally. Finally, for our bonus of the week this week, we have Stalker Armor redone by Sportist. And this is a fairly straightforward mod that adds a new set of armor to the game that's stealth-based, which you can, see here naturally. It's a rather cool looking armor that's dark to help it, blend in with the shadows, and a hood to, help hide your face while you're stealing things left and right. But in order to get this armor, you're going to have to, well, you guessed it, steal it. And in order to steal it, you're going to need to be towards the end of the Thieves Guild quest, I believe. So it's a pretty difficult armor to get, really. And it does come in a variety of versions, including male and female versions, as well as a beast race version. And real quick, here you can see the armor pieces in my inventory. They have a pretty high, light armor rating, and they're worth about 1,000 gold apiece. They do use the Dark Brotherhood icons though, which is potentially confusing if you have a lot of Dark Brotherhood armor in your inventory. And anyway, that wraps up everything for this week's episode of Morrowind Showcases. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in another week with another episode and another batch of mods reviewing.